What's going on, guys? It's Bromley. Today I got a question from Thick De La Dick. Nice one. It's one of our Patreon members. We only allow the classiest of members onto the Alexander Bromley Patreon page, so remember that. So this question specifically is if I'd like to see Strongman in the Olympics. So I can talk a bit about how I see the sport, where I want it to go, but there's also going to be a little bit about how I feel about the Olympics, because I fucking hate the Olympics. And I'm going to get into that in a minute. Really quick, remember, check out our Patreon. We have $5 and $10 tiers. This is where I take all my questions from, and this is where all of my training videos get put. The longer, more fleshed out programming videos are going to go there. YouTube and the general social media sphere is going to get smaller videos like this with the occasional more fleshed out programming video. But the premium content's on the Patreon. Thank you for your support. That is what allows me to do this. So it is very much appreciated. So moving into the question whether or not I want to see Strongman in the Olympics. First of all, let's get into why I don't like the Olympics, and then I'll talk a little bit more about Strongman specifically, where I see it going. The Olympics is very unique in that it is not a business that produces something of value. It is quite simply a label that, for whatever reason, has become very, very sought after on the world stage. Developing countries use it as a way to kind of build clout and status. It's a way for the people to engage in this national pride, and it does also have this other effect where it kind of puts everybody's attention on everybody else. So I think it does have the potential to be valuable as kind of an international tradition that builds goodwill across all nations. And in the past, it's also been the host of protests and boycotts and other political stuff. So the IOC, first and foremost, they make cities bid. And I've heard that the bidding, just to bid to get your city in the running for the Summer or Winter Olympics, can get over $10 million. Then you have to produce everything. I think it cost Brazil something like $12 billion to host the Olympics in Rio. And they're kind of famous now. The pictures of the crumbling coliseums that they had to have newly erected specifically for the Olympics. And there's examples of this all over the world, of these kind of former Olympic host city wastelands where everything they had to build up to host the party now has no use. So it just became dilapidated. So it's extremely wasteful. There's a ton of question as to whether or not there's an economic net benefit to these countries that host it. And you see a lot of countries that are still kind of in the developing country category that will break themselves because they're trying to build their own name, and they're trying to use something like the Olympics to spark themselves economically. But it's almost like this predatory thing where they demand so much of these nations. The nations produce everything with regards to the Olympics, and the IOC is just there kind of wagging their finger, telling people what regulations they have to meet to make them happy. So I sincerely dislike it. And the cherry on top, I don't know if you've seen these before. There were a couple different articles that came out over the last 10 years about insane demands. So when bidding was going on 8 or so years ago for the 2022 Winter Olympics, there was a very small group that had their hats in the running. It was Beijing, China, 2 other smaller countries, and then Oslo in Norway, which is, you would think a great spot for the Winter Olympics. Oslo ended up pulling their name out after they got the list of perks that the IOC expected. So in addition to having to spend all of the money on infrastructure to build this up, this is some of the stuff that the IOC expected. They demanded to meet the king prior to the opening ceremony. They wanted separate lanes to be created on all roads where IOC members will travel, which are not to be used by muggles. They wanted a welcome greeting from the local Olympic boss and the hotel manager. IOC members shall be greeted with a smile when arriving at their hotel. Like, can you think about how weird and like subtly oppressive that request is? Like, that's a special type of tyranny where it doesn't sound like an unreasonable request, but somebody went out of their way to mandate that the person greeting you when you arrive should be smiling. Like, you should get punched in the teeth for that. That's somebody who needs to be taken down a peg. And especially when you add this kind of like aristocratic sense to all of this, that again, these people are just leveraging the popularity of their brand on the world stage and they aren't actually producing anything, it makes it that much more gross. So that was a perfect example. So the article I read, it said, and this is from so many years back when bidding was still going on, but it said Oslo pulls out in the wake of the 2022 Olympics that nobody wants. And that's kind of where we're getting, where there's a very small list of people who are willing to spread themselves thin. And usually it's countries that are really big on international presence, which is why it's going to be in Beijing next year, because China is a massive country and they'll throw a ton of money because they're big on pageantry and performance and stuff like that, and they can afford it. The IOC after that issued a statement. This is a missed opportunity for the city of Oslo and for all the people of Norway who are known worldwide for being huge fans of winter sports. And it is mostly a missed opportunity for the outstanding Norwegian athletes who will not be able to reach new Olympic heights in their home country. Of all of the douchiest, like gross things like this, it just put such a bad taste in my mouth. And then you add on to that all of the just miserable regulations that go on with like anti-doping and trying to keep a fair playing field. And you understand that they don't care. They throw out the most ridiculous rules because they just want to cast a wide net. They don't want to be bothered with subtlety or nuance or anything. So this is why, caffeine is a banned substance. Did you know caffeine is a performance enhancer? It absolutely is, and this is studied, but it's also the most widely used drug in the world. That's like saying that aspirin is banned because it thins your blood. I mean, there's a lot of stories of people losing medals because they took cold medicine the week before. So like pseudoephedrine popped up in their tests or something like that. There's a whole list of just ridiculous stuff that happens with athletes. As far as the whole transgender issue, that's something I recognize the complexity of, and I try not to take a very hard stance without kind of being sympathetic to both sides. But the hypocrisy of that shows itself very obviously when you're willing to strip medals because somebody took Sudafed, but you're going to allow transgender females to compete with cis females, even though that they're allowed, and this is actually in the IOC regulations as well, they're allowed to have up to 3 times the test levels that the average female competitor has. And I want to make clear that's not me just trying to paint the whole complex issue with a broad brush, but it is very obvious hypocrisy, and it's very obviously driven by social pressures. Again, they're not interested with what's best for the athletes. They're just interested in what's easiest as far as casting a broad net, what's socially prudent as far as presenting themselves in a way that the media is going to be receptive of, that's going to get them kudos and build up their brand. And that's really what it is. So anyway, so the International Olympic Committee, I'm not a fan. I don't care about sports getting to the Olympics. I know people see that as some pinnacle of sport, and I don't think it is, especially when they start gutting the sport to fit their model. So like powerlifting. If powerlifting ever got into the Olympics, and there's some people that are pushing hard for that, it would be a very watered down version that not a lot of people would care about. I mean, they would be featured every 4 years, but first of all, the drug testing would take a big chunk off the total. So you're looking at powerlifting throughout the year, you're seeing 2,500 pound totals from super heavyweights. If we're just going raw with wraps, powerlifting at the Olympics would be like 2,200 pound totals, because you would have to select for athletes that either are natty or are smart enough and savvy enough to beat the test. So anyways, as far as strongman, where I'd like to see strongman go, well, first of all, strongman's never going to be in the Olympics because you need standardization. To my knowledge, I don't think there's a sport in the Olympics that varies or has that variation in it the way something like, let's say, CrossFit does. Strongman is not agreed upon. It's not standardized in terms of implements, in terms of events. There's kind of a thread of consistency. You see the same type of movements, but a lot of times, for better or worse, people get creative and they like to mix it up. And never really knowing what type of equipment you'll be moving on, it's part of the allure of it. It's part of what makes the sport what it is. I think the way Strongman's trucking right now is perfect. This is exactly what I want to see. We had the last 15 years since I've been a part of it where the base has been growing. You have consumer participation, meaning the recreational lifter, the all pay to feel like an athlete for today type of lifter and competitor. And that grew and grew and grew, and that's kind of supporting the top end now as people are pooling resources towards the most competitive people. Worlds Worlds has been kind of stagnant, but the Arnold's growing. Then there were a bunch of satellite Arnolds that came up. WUS is doing some really cool stuff with core sports and streaming. Remember, they're hosting Clash on the Coast in end of April, so tune in. They're doing a lot of really cool stuff. So money and advertising is finally going to the big show. And that's what we've been missing. It's always been a niche sport at the top that supported a bunch of niche fans that wanted to compete in these smaller backyard events. Now we're finally getting enough attention and resources to be able to push it towards the top. And that's how sport grows. Sport grows when you can find a way to monetize the best of the best competing. And that's what Strongman was missing for quite a long time. So the fact that I can go to the gas station across from my apartment complex and see Thor's ugly face on a rain sign, it's a picture of him deadlifting at the Arnold. It's like, we're starting to make it. This isn't just the Game of Thrones guy. This is quite literally, this is the guy that deadlifted, over 1,000 pounds at the Arnold. And this is a World's Strongest Man winner. That's what they're using him as. And the fact that he has that attention is absolutely huge. It's a good sign. So I'd like to see it keep going. We'll see what the weight classes do. I'm not a fan of weight classes in general. For combat sports, it makes sense. For weightlifting, everybody has just accepted it because that's always how it's been, even though we don't use that in endurance sports or track or throwing or really anything else. Even Highland Games, I think, has it the best A, B, and C group. You know, it's not about how big you are. Get as big as you need to do as good as you can at the sport. If I'm going to go run, I'm going to get as small as I need to be good at the sport. Keep in mind, I'm a weight class competitor. It's in my best interest to tell you that weight classes matter and give you my body weight coefficient. But from a sport purist standpoint, there is a point where adding more classes waters it down. And I think that's why strength sports have continued in the past to be so niche. So I'd like to see Strongman keep moving. I think the women's division is great. It's coming up. I could give a shit about the Masters division. Yeah, like OSG included the Masters, you know, it's supposed to be the world's strongest man for these other divisions. So they had like four or five weight classes. They had the Open, the 105s, the 90, the 80. Did they have a 70? No, they had 4 weight classes. I believe 4 for the men, 4 for the women. Okay, great. That's still too many weight classes as far as I'm concerned. And if you're interested, again, in growing the best of the best, you have to commit to the most viable groups. And the fact is, nobody cares about 80 kilogram strongman. They just don't. I mean, I'm a 105. I barely care about 105 strongman. Everybody's idea of the pinnacle of the sport is the big show. And I think there's room for that for the men, room for that for the women. Beyond that, you might be able to feature one smaller weight class and have it taken seriously and given attention to. But beyond that, people's eyes are going to glaze over. People aren't going to keep track. They're not going to care that much. And you're just going to have this consumer-driven sport where you're opening up weight classes just so you can get more entry fees and have more participation. As far as a marketing and promotion standpoint, more weight classes is not better for the sport. And then the Masters, OSG had Masters, which, again, that's purely for participation. No, there was not a big buzz. I mean, they got some former World's Strongest Man guys there. But again, you're watching these guys past their prime, engage in feats of strength. Terry Hollins ran through everybody because he was one of the younger guys and he's still very much at the top. But you had Mark Felix in his 50s. You had, Vitas Blakaitis. Like, I beat him on half the events because they use the same weights as the 105s. It was hard to watch. So I think from a recreational standpoint, that's great. But again, from promoting the sport on the big stage at the top, that is a detriment. So anyways, I think the way that it's going is good. I think we're finally getting a lot of money and attention at the big show. The promoters have figured out how to monetize it. That's what you need to get a sport to grow. People go to watch NFL games. The organization makes a lot of money in that, and then they advertise and they sell concessions. They have all these ways of making money off of it. So until you have a way of money that doesn't involve turning the athlete into the consumer, you're not going to have a viable sport. So Strongman's finally getting to that point, so it's cool to see. Social media is helping. You know, I'm not a huge fan of Shaw and Thor and Halls and everybody else's YouTube pages or whatever. But you know what? The fact that there are fans willing to watch it, those are people that are going to invest. So I guess that has helped the sport grow. So the fact that there is the same pool of people and they're competing across all federations, that contributes to the consistency of it and the cohesiveness of it. So as long as that's maintained, I don't really care about the rest. If there's a couple big organizations that they move back and forth in between, I don't care so much. But the cohesiveness has to be maintained. So it can't be 20 different divisions where some have different rules and they're mutually exclusive and you get different groups, because that will water down the sport, just like having all the weight classes will water down the sport. So I think there is room. I think everybody identifies, the biggest athletes in strongman. It is a sport for maximal strength, which will always favor the biggest athlete. And then that gets brought back just a little bit with the moving events. You can't be 50% body fat and do well in a medley. So I think the sport already strikes a good balance. I think there's room for probably one extra weight class. For men in Strongman Corp, you have the Open, the heavyweight pros, and the 105 pros. I'd like to see the same in women's divisions. For whatever reason, there's 3 women's pro divisions. But not only do you have fewer female athletes, so you have smaller divisions, but fewer people care. Fewer people care about women, but fewer people care about the smaller weight classes. So again, from trying to get attention and advertising to try and monetize the biggest group, you can't just play the inclusiveness for the sake of it. You have to figure out what's going to be marketable, what's going to sell. And in Strongman, it's going to be the bigger competitors. Anything beyond a couple weight classes, and I think you're shooting yourself in the foot. But anyways, that's my rant on that. Let me know what you think about this. Let me know what your experience has been, or what you think the future of the sport's ultimately going to be. I think there's a lot of growth yet. I don't think we've hit a bubble yet. I think we're just starting to get rolling with the prize packages that are put out, and with the people that have accrued a bunch of social media followers in the last couple of years. I think the sport's going to continue to grow so long as we can get some intelligent people from a promoting standpoint. Good promotion is key. That's more than just throwing equipment at a venue. You have to be able to create a buzz. You have to make people care. You have to manipulate people to marketing. You have to manipulate people into caring about what they're watching. So once we get that, I think this is going to be a sport that becomes a staple for a long time. So I'm eager to see where it goes. So thanks again, guys, for watching. If you have any questions, leave them. Until next time, this is Bromley at Empire Barbell. I'll see you.